Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the
to
flag
the flag
of the
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Supervisor Schneiderman,
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
All right, thank you, Sunday. I don't know if Ryan's coming on to do a COVID update, probably sometime this morning. There are some new things, some changes at the state level in terms of sizes of gatherings and things like that. COVID does continue to be a significant concern though locally. The numbers are sort of the same as where they were last time I talked to you guys about it. We're still seeing about anywhere between 10 to 15 cases per day in the town, sometimes even a little higher than that. So sometimes slightly lower. So we're hoping those numbers come down even further. But if Ryan can get on later, that could be helpful. All right. So if everybody can look at their agenda, the first item is a presentation of the Bridgehampton Historic District Review and Design Guidelines. So we're going to bring in Julie Green, our town historian. Charles, if you could let her in. And it's been a while since the board has talked about downtown Bridgehampton, and sort of where we left off was that we felt that there was a significant amount of historic elements that needed to be protected, and we tasked Julie Green with sort of developing a plan that could protect those things and retain the character, the historic character, for fear that without guidelines, future construction and reconstruction could certainly take away what people love most about downtown Bridgehampton. It is probably the only settlement of that period that isn't protected by historic designation. So if you look at areas like Sag Harbor, Historic District, East Hampton Village, Historic District, Southampton Village, Historic District, even Quag is a historic district. So it is not. Julie has been working really hard on this, and she has a presentation. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Julie.
Good morning, everybody. Supervisor Schneiderman, members of the board, Town Clerk Cindy Schurmeyer, thank you so much for having me this morning. Bridgehampton is very dear and near to my heart. So I've worked really hard putting this all together. I hope everyone's received their copy. Is that right? Everyone's got the copy. So what I'm going to review this morning, because it is 86 pages in total, is just the history, the establishing of a district, and the guidelines part. I gave a quick presentation to the Landmarks and Historic District Board the other evening, their last monthly meeting, and they have the guidelines, which is really their bailiwick, and can better answer those questions. I'm waiting for comment from them. So I'm going to do the first parts. Just also wanted to mention that Ed Wisnowski mentioned to me that they are working currently on possibly making Southampton Town a certified local government. So that may change, that may be working with the state, with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. So that may change historic districts going forward. But I understand that he may be, they're working together with the state, and that may be something coming down the road for all of you. So to get on with the review part of the report. So we have preservation goals for establishing Bridgehampton's Main Street as a historic district. We want to retain the architectural integrity and the setting of the historic houses and historic barns, maintain the architectural integrity of the historic commercial buildings. We want to retain the rural and informal character of the central business area. This district is characterized by a mix of building types, by a significant amount of open space, and by spaces between buildings. We want to guide redevelopment of non-historic buildings to increase compatibility with neighboring historic commercial and residential buildings and with the character of the historic in general. The supervisor was mentioning other historic districts. There are 7 others in the town of Southampton. There is Southampton, North Main Street, Wickapog Road Historic District, Southampton Beach Road Historic District, Sag Harbor Village District, Sagaponack Main Street, Sag Main Street Village District, the Quogue Historic District, which is relatively new. It was listed in 2016, and then the Southampton Village Historic District as a whole. Okay, so we want to make sure that we retain all of our good qualities that are within these 58. There's approximately 58 properties that are contributing. There are 3 historic sites, one of which is the monument. The other is Triangular Commons, which is our 1670s militia green, as well as our 1714 cemetery, which is right in the center on the south side of Main Street. We have approximately 5 town-owned properties with some parking areas behind Main Street that we're including. And I'm going to start my presentation. So these contributing properties range in condition and different degrees of alteration.
Julie, are you going to be screen sharing?
I'm not sharing. Hold
Not
on.
at all.
You're not currently sharing.
No.
One sec. Sorry.
It might be at our end, so Charles
No,
might
it's-
allow it.
No,
Not our-
I'm
it's
sure
not
Charles
our
did it right, and I just, there we go. Okay. Share. Brilliant. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Okay. Come on. Okay. So the parts of here are history, as well as the guidelines, the actual design guidelines that are set up. I worked with Sally Spanberg, our former Landmarks and Historic District Board chairwoman, and she helped with those things. So we'll kind of go through this as quick as possible. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at it. So any questions so far? Anybody have any questions from what you've seen so far? No? Okay. Okay, so the introduction is the importance of establishing a historic district in Bridgehampton. That would be the #1 goal here. We are not immune to destruction and demolition of significant structures in the town of Southampton, so we need to work on steps to protect those. The Landmarks and Historic District Board have put all those measures in place for buildings that are a certain age, so that we can have needless demolitions and alterations can be permanently prevented. Why are historic districts important? So they have quality, sustainability, conserving energy. This is a picture here of Basso's restaurant from about 1925, and it is now World Pie up there on your right-hand side. Structure still pretty much exactly as it was. And we want to retain that look. The economic benefits of rehabilitating a historic structure can cost less than building a new one. What's more of the investment goes towards labor, not materials, helping to keep a local economy humming. In Bridgehampton's case, preserving its historic character helps its economy through increased tourism and higher property values. And then we have our cultural history here in Bridgehampton. So this is my part of it, which is the history of Bridgehampton, established in 1656 with the building of a home in Sagaponack on Bridge Lane. by Josiah Stamborough. He was one of the original undertakers who came to Southampton, established Southampton in 1640. And then as the settlement, the original settlement was along the southern shore of Mecox Road. The development was originally in Mecox, and then as the area between Southampton, going through Bridgehampton to East Hampton, became a more northern establishment. So the first home that was built was in 1686. It was John Wick's Tavern. It was her first house built along Main Street. This stood at the corner of the Turnpike at Main Street. Now there's a new building that was built a few years ago. This was torn down in 1939 to make way for a gas station, which ultimately became a beverage store. And these are the type of things that a historic district can prevent in the future. 1690 is when the bridge was built across Bridge Lane into Sagaponack, where the name stems from, of Bridgehampton, bridging the two earlier settlements of Mecox and Sag together. In the early 1700s, it was a whaling and farming community. When the port of Sag Harbor opened, it allowed whaling that was onshore whaling, and easy access for whale oil to be brought into Sag Harbor and then shipped to other areas of the country. In 1706, the first windmill was built on the Triangular Commons. Windmills were built and given right to mill rights to work for the community, to grind grain at a price fair for all those that live there. And it was just establishing a community, giving them the resources they needed to establish themselves. So this is really when it kind of really took off for Bridgehampton, was in the early 18th century. It was an agrarian settlement, pretty isolated. By the 1820s and 1860s, we see a lot more development. This is a map from 1856. The northern side of the street is where most of the buildings and residents were originally. The southern side was more residential, churches, cemetery, that type of thing. And then everything changed in 1870 when the railroad came. So it's a pretty significant period of time, 151 years ago. The Bridgehampton was the terminus of the railroad line for 25 years. The railroad didn't extend eastward until 1895 into East Hampton. So Bridgehampton, everyone had to get off in Bridgehampton, and Bridgehampton grew from that with boarding houses, and it was the heyday of the summer resort period. And we also had the Bridgehampton Golf Club opening in 1901. The Hampton Library was built in 1877. And it's a fun fact that the library, the railroad shipped the library's lumber gratis so that they would build a library. It was the only building east of Brooklyn, only library in 1877 east of Brooklyn. So it had a significance at that point too. 1909, sadly, we don't have it anymore, but the Bridgehampton National Bank was established. It was in the East Wing of Loper's General Store. Now this building is now Starbucks. It's been slightly altered in the 1920s. It was completely wrapped in brick face to match. But if everybody goes into Starbucks, you'll see the old bank vault in there. In 1910, the monument was unveiled. In the teens, in the 20s, through the early 20s, Bridgehampton's Main Street held the first streetcar races on the eastern end of Long Island. And that building in the back is still standing, at least the left hand portion is still there. That was Sanford's Water Building. The community house was built in the 1920s, 1923. Schoolhouse was built in 1931. We all know of the destruction of the hurricane of 38. In 1956, the Historical Society was established and they moved into the William Corwith House. In 1969, legendary watering called Bobby Van opened, continuing a walkability and an area of downtown that people visited quite frequently. And then from the 1970s to present, we've been things that are further out where farmlands have been sold off. We had the drive-in movie theater, and now we have the Plaza East shopping center. In 2003, the town purchased Nathaniel Rogers House, which began an incredible restoration project of this Greek revival house, one of the best representatives of that architecture on Long Island. And currently we're under a kind of a Hamlet revitalization project, restoring the triangular commons, militia green, with a new walkway. So there are things that are happening in Bridgehampton that are making it more than just a pass through to East Hampton, which is nice to see. Bridgehampton's Main Street property overview. So this was done by Ed Wisnowski. I added a few properties after the supervisor and I spoke on Ocean Road that are wonderful little residents, and they all are contributing structures. Just another overview and a base map showing all the properties. And then this is basically about, the importance of establishing a district starting on the eastern end at the where the monument stands. We've got the Topping Rose House, the newly restored Nathaniel Rogers House, which has its cupola on top. And then we just go through the northern side of the street, which is on the top page, and its image across the street is on the bottom of the page. All of these structures that I've included in here are contributing, except for maybe one or two, but I tried to keep a sense of Main Street by attaching the buildings. And because of the pandemic and nobody was on Main Street, I was able to get some really good shots of all these buildings without cars in the way. So most of the prominent structures downtown date to the middle of the 19th century, and they show the era's outstanding architecture, like a federal style Bridgehampton Museum, William Corwith House, the Victorian 1876 Hampton Library, the Greek Revival Bridgehampton Inn, which did an incredible job of adding an addition that doesn't detract. It's a new building, but they've been able to add it to the original 1825 inn, and looks pretty good. So these were the guidelines that will follow exactly what they did. There's the three churches, two of which are 19th century. There's the community house, which is 1923. It's a typical classic revival style. All these buildings have been well maintained, as well as the recent restorations of the Bull's Head Inn, which is now the Topping Rose House, and the Nathaniel Rogers. More of the structures along Main Street. I kind of think that if you got off the train in 1880 and you got off the train today, you'd be able to kind of pick out the same buildings, the same look, the same feel, and that would be wonderful to be protected. And the western end of the town would be with the Methodist Church, as well as the Dr. Hugh Halsey House, which is on your top left. That is currently a resident, and they have done everything to protect their home thus far. So the design guidelines, as I mentioned, this is more of the landmarks board's purview, and if anyone has any comments thus far, or if anyone has any comments on these guidelines, these are not codified. They're just put together as kind of do's and don'ts, encouragements and discouragements of what you can and cannot do to a property. And this is basically just front facade work. This would not entail anything that you couldn't do to the back of any structure. Most of the buildings on Main Street are 19th century, and they're all in different states of alteration. Some have been completely built out in the front, but the 19th century building is behind them, still standing, still part of the building. And there are others that are standing that have had no alteration since they were built at the turn of the 20th century. So the purpose of these guidelines have been prepared to assist Southampton Town Review Boards and property owners with information when considering design modifications to historic properties. They should complement consultation with qualified architects, contractors, and the Southampton Landmarks and Historic District Board. The District Board, the Landmarks Board reviews demolition and construction permit applications that are submitted through the town building department for structures being built before 1941, or those that are recognized historic resources. So these guidelines that we're coming up on all follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And I want to point out here that these are 4 of the one-story brick buildings that were built by Kenneth Chester in 1928. They hold various commercial enterprises inside. It's interesting to note that when they were built in 1928, they were attached to D.L. Chester's store, which is now Almond Restaurant. And the newspaper made note that the Chester stores were built on values and have grown on values. Courteous service and high-grade merchandise have brought the firm a large clientele extending all over Eastern Long Island. So it's a nice thing to see that they were recognizing at that time what they were building. Secretary, these are the interior standards for rehabilitation. And then all different types of alterations, additions to historic structures, building primary buildings, secondary structures such as garage, sheds, pool houses, and guest houses, and then new porches and decks. We all know that building shows economic health. New construction can result in a dramatic change to the visual appearance and the well-being of a community. Because of this, new construction and additions are encouraged to be designed to complement and be compatible with the historic character of downtown. So here's new construction. This is the Candy Kitchen, built in 1925. This picture is probably from the about 1976, the above picture, when it was a standalone, and the second 2-story brick construction below it that is to the east of the Candy Kitchen, complementing the brick work of the Candy Kitchen's eastern side, and the structure was built. So it's just kind of clearly contemporary in design, but compatible in size and scale. So more of different types of additions to historic resources, what is encouraged, what's discouraged. This is size and scale. So there are standards, size and scale being one of them. Proportion, we don't want things to change proportionately. Form and massing. This is a no, because the exterior, the addition does not have the same roof line. Orientation, same situation. We want things to be compatible, have the same setbacks. Rhythm and patterns. Windows and door openings to be historically accurate. This is a newly restored window at the Nathaniel Rogers house. And if everybody hasn't gone to see it yet, it's a treat. It's just beautiful, beautifully done. And with its cupola back on top, it's really nice. And then we have architectural details. This is the Chatfield House. It's built in 1897. And this building is exactly as it was in 1897, except for probably roof shinglings have changed. But this is a wonderful architectural detail that there's not many of, kind of elements of Craftsman and Queen Anne style of architecture. Materials and texture, we have abundance of different types of material. We have brick, stucco, all different sorts of things that have been there since the turn of the 20th century. This is a photo from about the 1940s when it was DePetris Food Market. It was originally built in 1916 as the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, the AMP, and it is now Sotheby's Realty, and it looks, except for the signage, it looks the same, and the nice baskets of fruit. So streetscape, this is about setbacks and keeping building facades cohesive within the district. Secondary buildings and structures. Many of the properties in Bridgehampton include more than one structure. In many cases, secondary and accessory building structures and landscape features are also present and contribute significantly to the character of the property, setting, and district. I wanted to show this one. This is the Dr. Mulford House. It's at 24 Lumber Lane. It's right behind the Starbucks. And we put it in the district because the house itself is historic, as well as its accessory building that's behind. This is the carriage house that Dr. Mulford used originally for his horse and carriage, which you can see on the lower photograph. And then later it housed a Stanley steamer. And what's a nice thing to point out about Dr. Mulford, he was seeing patients during the Spanish flu pandemic, 1918 and 1919. He didn't lose a single patient. He told them not to travel. This is another accessory building that's significant. It was built at the same time the house was built. This is the barn for the Topping Rose house, which they converted to use as event space. Barn looks very similar to how it was. They may have reorientated it, but it's the same structure. And then we get into demolition of accessory buildings, new accessory buildings, building relocation. This is the Strong Wheelwright Shop. It was moved from the Strong Farm at the corner of Town Line Road and Parsonage Lane in Sagaponack. It was given to the Southampton the Bridgehampton Historical Society in 1962, and forever its history will be preserved. Wheelwrighting was up until the automobile. This is how people got around, and these were where their wheels were made. And then there's demolition, which we hope to avoid. Existing historic structures is drastic and irreversible action with negative impacts far beyond the immediate associated site. So this is Wick's Tavern, built in 1686, which was the first building to establish the area that became known as the Bull's Head. It was torn down, as I mentioned earlier, in 1939, erasing a significant portion of the Hamlet's history. This was a tavern. This was a stagecoach stop, a place for people to spend the night that were traveling on Long Island. And then, and so this was torn down, and there was a gas station put here in the 1930s. The building to the bottom left, that's the Tucker and Murray Garage. It became known as more familiar now as the Pulver Gas Company building. This was the first car dealership in Bridgehampton. This photograph is from 1929. And unfortunately, this building was purchased by the Bridgehampton Fire Department and tore down for more space and use for their, for making a larger home for their department. These are things that we discourage and encourage for demolition. And again, once it's gone, it's gone. And then archaeological resources and excavation, because these are such old structures, the site that they stand on also has potential historic resource. So there are steps and measures in place currently with the state on what to do if one is to find something of historical significance. So that's kind of where we're at on this end. The second part of the report is mainly the inventory of the town and the resources, inventory of the hamlet and the resources therein. The resources were done by the Landmarks and Historic District Board, as well as other earlier reports from 2014. I used those as a basis, and I added information as I researched each one of these properties. So there's significant information about each property, and its town criteria is all listed in that as well. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Julie. That's very comprehensive. Excellent work on this, by the way.
Thank you.
Really, it's really put together in a very, cohesive way. The language is very user-friendly. And, I guess my first question, before I kick it to the board here, is have you reached out to any of the business owners on Main Street? Do you think we're going to get opposition to this, or do you think they'll embrace it? I would think that it's in their interest, personally, to have these types of standards in place to make sure that the area doesn't lose its character. But have you had any conversations with any of the businesses?
We have, Ed and I had gone out and had an open night for people to come. I presented the historic part of this to them to show the importance. And I know that Ed has also been out talking to some of the local, most of these people are local property owners, and they're all pretty much on board. The Bridgehampton Inn, I've spoken to them, and they've worked hard to keep the character, and I think they are very cognizant of the fact that if there are no preservation things put in place, the character of their house could be jeopardized by somebody building something that's completely inappropriate. So they're on board with this, and the town has done some significant work. The topping rows, I know that they're all for this because they have done exactly what this report asks of them.
To effectuate these changes, though, we'd have to do an amendment to the town code, right? So the lawyers would have to put the map in there. We'd have to hold a public hearing and specifically state that if you're doing work within these boundaries, this is, these are the approvals you need.
Right. And all of that, that decision making on what is, easements and tax credits and all of that. That's
right.
This is just.
We'd have to convert your plan. Well, I guess we'd have to adopt your plan and then convert it into code language.
Right.
Jim, did you have anything to say on that in terms of mechanistically how a district gets established? Oh, you're muted, Jim. I'm sorry. And maybe Julie, you could stop screen sharing if you want.
Okay.
Obviously, we need to do public hearings, have the proper notice and public hearings. I've been involved in this in other municipalities. I think you're right. I think for the most part in these historic districts like this, the people will be supportive. There's always a few that are concerned that it might hurt their value, their ability to limit sometimes their options, but overall, particularly in a setting like Bridgehampton, I think there's value to what's there, and people don't understand that, so. But yeah, we have to do the public hearings and present what we and have the public have an opportunity to address any concerns, and then the board can move ahead from there.
All right, so let me turn it over to the town board. Do you guys have any questions for Julie or anyone else?
Yeah, I did have a question, Julie, and this is a great report. And I had the same experience. Most people are pretty accepting of this. Of course, they want to know more about the hows and whys, and that is up to us, I suppose, with our code. But you did mention at the very beginning about the certification of municipalities. Could you go into that? I didn't quite understand that. I'm not sure the people listening understand what you were referring to.
Because I was referring to what Ed had told me prior to me talking with the Landmark Board about this report, just that he is working with land planning. They had a meeting at their January meeting as an effort for the Southampton town to become a certified local government. I'm just going to kind of read what he wrote to me. Under the State Historic Preservation Office and federal legislation for the purposes of historic preservation, including the standards and process for designating landmarks and historic districts. So they're working with the states and national level historic districts, they're basically honorary, and don't have any, at a local level, there's more bite to them, to be frank. I'm not sure what this is all about. I know he did say that he would be, in the coming months, there would be a briefing on this for the town board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, the certified local government is out of the Parks and Recreation Department, Historic Preservation of New York State, and it's a grant mechanism as well. Is that correct? Well, we'll wait to the presentation.
Yes, I don't know all the specifics on it.
Yeah. I'm looking at it now. I have a couple. Again, like Councilman Bouvier said, great report. I love it, and I love hearing the history. It's just, that's fantastic. There's a lot of love in Bridgehampton for their Main Street, and for good reason. And one of the aspects of Bridgehampton are the iconic trees that they have on Main Street and on some of the back roads. Is there anything in the historic district that can tie in some of the trees for the look of the roads in Bridgehampton?
I'm sure that can all be part of the streetscape, keeping that look and that feel, that rural feel. That would just need to be put in there, that the trees and the setting are to be preserved as well.
Okay. I appreciate the update. I was at the public hearing that you all had, and I thought it was there was positive response as well.
Yes, it was a couple of years ago, but lots happened since then. So I hope more people will be on board. I know that I believe Ed has reached out by letter to all the local owners, or all the owners, local and elsewhere.
I think the biggest surprise in terms of the public will be that there isn't already a historic district in place in downtown Bridgehampton.
Yeah.
We've gotten lucky in a sense that we've retained so many elements of the historic downtown without having these protections. But most people probably assume, particularly when they see that heritage area sign, that there's something in place, but there isn't.
Right.
So, and I think the sooner we put it into place, the better. Can I ask what, sometimes it's nice to see some modern elements. I noticed when the Bridgehampton, I guess, is it the Bridgehampton Inn where Loaves and Fishes is?
Right.
They have connected the two things together. There's a church there that added a new section that was modern to sort of distinguish it from the older section.
That's right.
Is there a role for any modern elements within a historic district?
Sure. I mean, there are parts of the guidelines in here that talk about adding new additions, and yeah, saying the Queen of Most Holy Rosary. Sure, their building that they added used all the elements of the old roof line and newer elements of glass, and it works, and it can work. These aren't supposed to be so stringent that you can't do anything to the structure that's there. There are ways to incorporate new architecture without losing the feel that exists.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly important as we have goals, energy goals, and the certifications for energy loss and measurement of BTU and emissions and all that. And that allows you to keep the architectural style, but also involve modern elements that help us reach some of those goals. So it's actually really well done. So your point, Supervisor, is a really good one. That to be able to incorporate those things, but yet maintain the character of the area, that can be done, and it has been done in a couple of cases in Virginia already.
Sure. Well, these old buildings were once modern buildings.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's interesting that the very first building in Bridgehampton happened to be a tavern. I thought, I'm not sure who was coming. I guess it was for people driving through, but
They,
Seems
yeah.
perfectly logical to me.
Yeah.
for who? That's
I'm
the
with you,
question.
John.
I know. I mean,
You think you'd start with the houses first, and then when you had enough houses, you'd have a tavern, but they started at the tavern.
That's
The
where
right
you
priorities. Yeah.
found labor historically.
being
Labor.
the only building, it served many purposes. So it was a residence for the Wick family, but they would take in, of course, people on horseback. We think of getting from Bridgehampton to East Hampton is a 15-minute quick trip. Not the case in the colonial era. And I know I've talked about the triangular common a lot, but which is the militia green, which has nicely been restored. That's where the militia practiced for, close to 100 years. And after a long day of practicing drills, they wanted to have a pint somewhere. So
I'm sure they needed
tripled as a tavern.
It was
they
also
probably
a
needed
eating.
they probably needed a drink, but apparently it was faster to go from Bridgehampton to East Hampton by horseback then than it is today by car.
Depends on what time of day, right? Or actually any time of day now is.
And when they do the downtown road races, the top speed is 5 miles an hour. So just so you know, that's about all you can do. All right.
Speaking of the road races, the actual road itself is historic for that very thing they started, and they actually drove west on Main Street, closed down everything. It was big doings, and hundreds of people came into Bridgehampton for those road races. Yeah, it's pretty special history.
All right. And anyone else? Is everybody okay with moving this forward?
Yes.
Anybody not okay with moving it forward?
I just have a quick comment, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Just on this, the book itself that you gave us, it's great. I especially like the standards part because it's really easy to use. So even a layperson like me looking through the yeses and the nos, it kind of gives you a good sense of what can be done and what probably shouldn't be done. And just on a personal note, I loved all the old maps and old pictures. It just, it made it really interesting and kind of hits home, and you get to see what our community was like back in the day. And I thought that was really cool. So thanks for putting all that time into this. Thank
you. I've worked in Bridgehampton. I started in the library, 18 years ago. And then worked to the Historical Society. So Bridgehampton, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a really special place, and it sometimes seems to get a little bit overlooked. And I think if we can give it its due, it's time. So
no, absolutely. So Jim, can you work with Julie Green in moving this forward, getting a public hearing date?
Sure.
I'll be happy to sponsor this legislation.
Okay.
If
Yep.
anybody else wants to co-sponsor, please, join on. Council.
Thank everybody.
All right. So, Jim, note that Tommy John Scavone, Councilman Scavone, Councilman Bouvier, and Councilman Martell all want to co-sponsor this. So,
Sure.
it sounds like the whole board. I saw Julie's hand go up too. So, so it's going to be a whole board sponsored resolution.
You got it.
And Julie, this time I would love for you to come and speak again at the Bridgehampton CAC.
yes,
I'm sure they would love to
I'd
hear
be
that.
happy to.
Now, can we get this plan onto the town's website that people can start looking at it?
See why not?
Sunday, is that, you're muted, but it looks like you're agreeing.
I don't see why not. As long as you would like it to be there, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's put it up. I think it's in the proper format. I don't see much changes to it. So let's put it up as is. Let people have a chance, because they're going to be watching this and reading about this conversation. There ought to be a way for them to go take a look at it.
Absolutely. And Julie, if you want to coordinate that with Deborah Keller.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. ASAP on that one.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Have a nice
Great
day.
job, Julie.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Julie.
All right. So I did communicate with Ryan. So as some of you are probably aware, the Greek Orthodox Church is a vaccine site today, and there are the hospital was able to get some vaccines, and they're being administered there just on a one-day basis. So Ryan is assisting, and I told him to stay there, even though he said he could, telephone in. I asked him to not stay in. Maybe later in the meeting, I'll just read you some of the, some of the changes that the governor put out yesterday in terms of gathering sizes and indoor gatherings and things like that. So it is 10:47 at the moment by my clock, and that's right on time for the next conversation. So on the next agenda item is a follow-up on helium balloons. You may remember that Tip Brolin approached us some time ago, asked us to look at helium balloons, and Tip is being brought in. And I don't think anybody's proposed any legislation since then. I know I have some thought about this issue, but Tip, welcome. You're not muted, right? So we should be able to hear you. You can go ahead and make your presentation to the board.
Let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay. You have all seen a couple of earlier versions of this. So what I'll do, if it's okay with you, is concentrate on the changes. There haven't been any changes to the proposed law, but there are answers to questions that various town board members have asked. So I will. The law is, of course, to prohibit the sale, distribution, and release of any lighter than air balloon, except for those balloons which are launched by the government. To minimize disruption in the businesses that sell these, we're proposing, obviously this is up to you, assuming you pass it, but we're proposing to give all year for people to get ready for this. Now, this is one of the areas which has changed, added to from the first presentation that I gave. These are some of the places, regional towns that have passed these bans, with the quotes from people with whom I've talked or press accounts. All of them seem to be favorable to the public. The town clerk on Block Island in particular said people love it. And so I think that answers one of the questions that I think Councilman Martell asked. Why is, of course, unchanged. This is a quote from the plastic bags law, and the intent is the same. Balloons are litter, of course. And as John mentioned, I think at one of our hearings, if you spend any time in the water, you see the results, which are not pretty. It's not just the balloons, of course, it's also the ribbons that hold them, which can get tied up with seabirds and other creatures. Although the industry claims that they're safe to release, in fact, there's plenty of evidence out there that it takes years or decades for it to decay, during which time they're a hazard. Another question I got earlier was on electrical outages. These are some examples, some of which are local. PSEG gave me these. I got these from a press release that they put out. So if you go on their website, they will mention specifically the hazards to their transmission lines of, in particular, mylar balloons, which conduct electricity. They also put a precautionary video about this problem. And Southampton Village had a serious outage on 4th of July in 2017. Glendale, California, which has passed a similar law, they've had an average of, I think that works out to be 14 outages per year that they documented in the whereas part of their legislation. So it's not a myth. Electrical outages are caused by mylar balloons. And the California state law, I may be wrong on that, but in California, that's been a particular concern with the outages and the failures causing forest fires. Also, and since I was in the hospital getting one of these MRI tests a while ago, the magnetic resonance imaging machines that we're all familiar with are cooled to make them work by helium, liquid helium, which boils at a very low temperature and therefore is used to keep their superconducting magnets superconducting. Now, Jay had asked a while ago that we asked the town in a sort of informal online survey what they thought of the ideas. These are the results, which I think you may have seen before. There is almost unanimity that they're a danger to the environment and to wildlife. And 2-to-1 voted for prohibiting the sale, distribution, release of lighter than air balloons. The business surveys were not unanimous, as one might expect. And the results are here. These were the areas of the town that we did this survey. It was more than a year ago, I think, that we did this. The intent, if you pass the law, would be to have an educational program to give people, particular businesses, plenty of advance warning and explaining why this is important. So in summary, we recommend the prohibition of the sale, distribution, and release of lighter than air balloons. Surveys show public support. If the law is passed, we'll have an educational campaign before the law goes into effect. Proposed effective date next January 1st. And the next step would be a public hearing. Questions?
All right. Anybody have questions for Tip? You know, Tip, one thing that, well, what, you can stop sharing so we can see everything.
I'm trying to figure out how to do it.
Should be a button maybe up at the top of the screen that says stop share.
Yeah,
You did it. Or
Yeah.
Charles
someone
did it
did
for you.
it.
Maybe somebody did it for you.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you often hear people will say, oh, the balloons on the beach don't come from us, right? They come from New Jersey or Connecticut or whatever it is, wherever the balloons people believe are coming from. I don't know if that's true, but you certainly could then make the argument, well, then everybody should ban the balloons, not just us. That was, if we set the standard, you said a whole bunch of communities have done it. I've been concerned throughout about the economic impacts, particularly during a pandemic right now with small businesses struggling. I don't want to do really anything right now to hurt small businesses. And I was wondering, as an interim sort of measure, since I don't think many people are intentionally releasing these balloons, and we already put that in place, the ban on intentional release. The balloons are probably getting released because they were tied to something, it got untied, or they accidentally got away from a child, whatever it might be. And there's, for every balloon you see in the air, there's probably a crying child somewhere. But I'm wondering if you couldn't require balloons that are sold, helium balloons, lighter than air balloons that are sold, to be tethered, like to be the string securely tied to a weighted object, so that, maybe it's the metal washer or something, but something so that if somebody let go of the string, it would go down and not up. Have you given any thought to something like that?
Oh, we did, and I looked at various towns and their comments. I think the bottom line, at least from what I've been able to assess, is it doesn't work. Because everyone, for example, I'll give you an example. My wife, Grania, whom probably all of you know, loves helium-filled balloons. So on her birthday, I always have helium-filled balloons. I tie them securely. I have never let a helium-filled balloon go on purpose, yet I have released helium-filled balloons. When I tie them to a weight or to my mailbox, for example, which many people do, the wind comes along. When I go out, a couple are missing. So I think the problem is the only way that various municipalities have found to deal with this is to not have helium-filled balloons. You still have balloons, just they don't float away, they go down to the ground. So I think the answer is, we thought about it, we don't think it'll work based on what we've seen. And regarding the businesses, I agree with you that we do want to avoid damage to local businesses. There aren't very many that do this, by the way, who aren't in favor. And many of the local businesses we talk to are in favor of banning them. But we think that the right way to handle this from the environmental standpoint, let alone the loss of helium, is to ban them. We don't think, based on the reactions that I've found from other municipalities, that this will be a problem. Yes, we will get complaints from the people who sell them. They'll have to sell something else.
Have you done an inventory of how many places in the town sell helium balloons?
Well, our survey showed that it was, let's see, I have to go back. One of the slides that I had showed how many people were surveyed. Those are, I think it was 18. I'm not sure.
18.
Yeah.
18, Tim.
Those are all those are the ones we could find.
Not including the village, right? Because the village, we can't pass laws for the village.
We went to the villages also.
Right.
Even though we can't pass the laws for the village. So that would mean that in the town, there are fewer than 18.
I mean, it would be interesting, since most of the small retail stores are in the villages, whether it's Sag Harbor or Southampton or West Hampton, whatever, a law that there aren't going to be that many places affected. But I know, like King Cullen, some of the big supermarkets, Hampton Bays, they do sell it.
Well, let me jump in here. One of the issues is not just the small retail stores that are selling it. You're not taking a product away from them. You're just taking away the ability to use a lighter than air gas. They can still sell balloons that are filled with air. As Tip said, that's the biggest problem, is that they get released inadvertently or overtly for whatever reason. Is really not the issue. The issue is that they do get into the environment. And there have been a lot of attempts, to your point about trying to find some way to keep a balloon from floating away. One upstate village would try to design with a valve in it that would, as the balloon rise, it would vent the helium, but it doesn't work because helium is a very light gas, and it continues to as the balloon rises. There's not much expansion on the balloon. It's not like an air-filled balloon.
The problem anyway. It'll just bring it down faster. That's all.
Exactly.
I mean,
So
in an area like this, if the balloon's going to end up in the water, right? I'm sorry, John.
Well, if you're near the water, perhaps, but that's again not really the issue. The issue is, if it's going to hurt small business, I just want to make the point that it doesn't take the ability for people, for businesses to sell balloons just using air. There's also the additional problem that we have, where you have big retailers that sell helium in a canister, and so residents will fill those as well. That's a harder thing to control. There is some talk in the state there are some state laws that already cover this, but not to this degree. But the issue still remains that you saw the statistic there, 85,000 roughly. That's the estimate of balloons that are captured. They end up in our waste stream as well as in the water. It's it is an issue. So we'd ask Tip to come back and answer some of your questions, but also your concern about small businesses right now with the pandemic is valid. That's why we'd suggested, actually Tip had suggested, look, we can make this active as of next year, after things start to normalize a little bit, gives businesses the businesses at least time. But there's also the education of the public. It's a big issue with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Tip, I don't know if you want to pound on.
Oh, I think you've covered it.
I mean, yeah,
All the estimates are that the pandemic, we will be back to normal by next January.
We'll have reason to celebrate, but we won't be able to celebrate with helium balloons, it sounds like. That's what I struggle with here. I mean, the environmental impacts are obvious. Every time I go to the beach, I'm picking up these balloons from the beach. They're all over the place, and it's disgusting. And the impacts to marine life are severe. I get that. I also, I think about the small businesses, and I think about my own childhood and the role that these helium balloons had in my own childhood. And they were always associated with happy times, birthday parties. They were, as somebody who's interested in science, they were fascinating to me. That they would, every other object fell to the ground, but they would float up. How is that possible? They were magical. So I have some mixed feelings about it. So I'm trying to reconcile that. But let me hear from some of the other town board members and see where people are at with this. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. In our last meeting, Tip, I had asked to get some numbers on power outages and some damage to the infrastructure from Mylar balloons, and you provided that. They're rather significant here on Long Island and in New Jersey, as well as in California. They created a fire in California, and a 26% increase in power outages reported by PSE&G. They are metallic, and they do cause short. There's some pretty interesting YouTubes on it. I've been, looking at this since we spoke, and they can certainly cause some damage. Now, those are the Mylar balloons, of course, and I know that this is predominantly for environmental reasons. And I also believe that the balloons that are released here end up in the ocean, and the balloons that we see here are probably from Nassau County or New Jersey, like the supervisor said. But something like this would certainly be a statement. I am concerned about the small businesses as well. But I want to thank you for the information on the infrastructure damage.
All right. I don't know, Rick or Julie, have any thoughts on this? John?
Sure. Rick, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Okay.
So I've talked to Tip quite often about this, and I appreciate Tip, the new presentation and answering the questions that I had. I was concerned on how it affected other areas. The end effect is that it is hurting our environment. It's hurting our wildlife, our sea life. And I have to take that very much into consideration as I back up and see how it does affect the small businesses. I think the number of 18 is probably low. I know there's at least 4, if not 5 places in Hampton Bays alone. And what I struggle with the most, and John has, we've talked very closely about, we have to be the first ones to do this, because I really think it's more a regional problem. I really wish Suffolk County had stepped in and all the towns and villages combined had decided to ban these for the better interest of all of us here. We already have a no release ban in place. I don't think our residents are abusing that. So to me, it just comes down to, are we really making a big impact? And are we making a big impact on our business, small businesses? I'm still struggling with that, but I'm leaning towards the end effect of is we have to be the stewards of our environment, and we have to do something, to make sure that we're not hurting it.
Interesting. All right. Julie?
Sure. So as the supervisor said, I'm definitely, and as Councilman Martell and Councilman Scavone, I think that we're all concerned about how it affects the businesses. And I appreciate the change of the start date of the law to 2022. But for me right now, and although things are getting better, businesses still aren't open fully. I would not be comfortable to say, okay, in less than 9 months, we're going to have this new law. And businesses are really just starting to get back on their feet now. Hopefully they will. The other thing is with the helium, the balloons go up. So and I understand all the reasons why helium, we need it for other purposes. But also if we just allow balloons to be filled with air, they're still going to be in our waste stream. And, uptown in Hampton Bays, we have plenty of drains. They have a little label on them. They say drains to bay, do not, litter here. And so honestly, I would assume that a good portion of those are going to go either into our waste stream at the transfer stations or into the gutters and then out into the ocean anyway. I wish it didn't happen. I wish people wouldn't buy helium balloons and wouldn't litter. But again, I gotta weigh that against how it's going to affect our businesses during this horrific time for them. And I am still struggling with that as well. But I want to thank you for all your research. And just on one other note, I think as Councilman Martell said, it is a regional issue. And I know that the Suffolk County Plastics Committee is looking into doing something regional. So maybe that will be coming sooner or later. If somebody in Hampton Bays wants to buy a balloon, they're going to run to Riverhead if they can't get it here.
Well, I'll speak a little bit. I support this law. The timing of it is adjustable. I think that's, so I don't really put that in my logic. I think, we can move that time. Tip put January of 2022. As we get closer, we would have to see how that goes. To Rick's point, I think, you set an example at times, quite often municipalities do this, and it gives a little push to the state and a little push to the county and a little push to others to look at it as a regional issue, because I do agree it is a regional issue, and how many balloons we're getting from other municipalities, I couldn't begin to even fathom a guess on that. But what we can do here is to bring attention to this issue and hopefully make people more responsive in that fact. If you release a balloon, it goes off, you don't think about it, it's gone. if you have an air-filled balloon, it's down, you can chase it. You have a better option of taking that balloon and disposing of it properly. I agreed with you, Julie, that, there are always those people that don't seem to think that the laws apply to them, or, and stuff happens. But I find it's more controllable. My feeling is that if we set an example, that we might spur both the state and the county to move along a little faster with what they've been working on for a long time. And there also is a serious issue. As an engineer, I'm really quite aware of the issue with the scarcity of helium as time goes by.
Yeah.
And it is an issue, regardless of where you can go and get your helium. It still is a commodity that can't be replaced, and it's becoming more expensive as time goes by. It's also becoming more intrinsic in a lot of the medical world, the use of it, particularly for imaging machines and things like that, as Tip had pointed out. So that, as far as the businesses go, it seems to me that we can work with businesses. I think in fact, it's cheaper for them not to have helium as a source of lighter than air gas, but to use air. It's a cheaper way. It costs them less, and I don't think it cuts out the business. I don't think it will reduce the demand for balloons. I don't know what percentage of their business balloons actually. Can't imagine it's that much. But I think if we offer this law up and then have true public hearings, we started to have that before the pandemic, and I think this is something that we can work on together as we go forward. So I'm leaning towards this law simply because I'm one of those guys who have seen up close and personal the damage that is done, not just to the environment that we all see, but to the offshore world, where you find animals tied up in this. It fouls props. There's a whole bunch of things that happen with heliums and the resultant tethers and that type of stuff. There've been a lot of people who worked on trying to find a solution to it, finding alternative lighter than air gases. But that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is still that you have a residual product that ends up really being a pretty destructive thing, that it's out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Because when you come up against a sea turtle or small whales that are entangled in this, it's really heartbreaking to see. So I'm in favor of this law. I think the timing is the issue here. Tip, we may have to move it till when it makes sense, so that we're not impacting small business. Small businesses that I've talked to don't seem to have the survey that Tip had done. I've had mixed answers to that question. I think the survey that the town conducted is fairly telling as well, that over 90% of the people felt that it had environmental damage, and 60, close to 70% of people thought that it should not be used. So having an impact on the small businesses, I agree with you. I think we can do the timing on this and the messaging to make that along, set an example, and hopefully we can get better legislation through the county and state authorities.
Does anybody know, are there such thing as a biodegradable helium balloon, like something that's water soluble?
Could I just chime in here for just a moment?
Yeah, sure, of course, Sandy.
25, 30 years ago, I had a party decorating business, and a huge portion of that was decorating parties with balloons. But I was also involved in a beach preservation organization, so I was very careful. We used biodegradable balloons back then. They would start degrading as soon as the sun hits them. But if they're released, I used to tell people 25 years ago that it was illegal in New York State to release balloons, even though that wasn't the law, just so that to discourage them when they would call me to do balloon releases. But I was picking up the balloons as well. I used to tie things to the balloons so that when the children would let them go, they would be little animals or, a little plastic heart or something. And, they would drop to the ground as opposed, but they still get away. I did huge archways for like nonprofit groups for their benefits and would come back to take the balloons back myself to make sure they weren't released and come back and find a 30-foot archway was gone because some kids thought it was a smart idea to release it into the air and watch it fly away. And it ended up in the telephone poles in Riverhead wrapped around the electric lines. This has been going on for decades. The beach issues and the cleanups and, it was very disturbing. And, there's not a lot of great answers to it because the Mylars never degrade. They're here forever.
And the latex as well.
Yeah, and the latex, it biodegrades depending on the type of, I used to spend extra money in order to buy the ones that do biodegrade, but, they have to be exposed to the sun. They don't biodegrade if they're underneath other garbage. So it's a difficult process, but, and what John Bouvier said about the helium was getting scarce 20 years ago. And the prices went up significantly on it because it was a commodity that was diminishing and wasn't going to necessarily be replaceable down the road. So I just wanted to let you know that this has been going on for a concern for just decades as far as the sea life and our beaches and such. So just wanted to offer that up.
Well, I know Tip has something to say, so I'll throw it to you, Tip, in a second. But I'm and I thank you for that, Sunday, because I'm one of the people on this board that probably the only one who's been swimming and diving in some of the gyres, particularly the Pacific Gyre, where we have plastics and the byproducts of modern living swirling in these giant gyres, these currents, these circular currents that are hundreds of miles wide. And when you see that, you see a large component of that are balloons. It's just kind of interesting to see. So I appreciate that. But I know Tip's been waving, so I'll pass it over to Tip.
I don't know whether you recall, but in my presentation, there was a photograph of various tattered pieces of latex balloons. Well, those are biodegradable balloons. That photograph was taken several years after they landed on the ground. So as the people who are admittedly advocates of this position point out, there are no biodegradable balloons. And as Sunday pointed out, if to the degree that they do degrade, you need ultraviolet light, you need sunlight, and of course, it still takes a very long time, and it doesn't take long at all for a sea creature, for example, to think that that nice thing floating on the top of the ocean is a jellyfish. And that's frequently why they get caught up in it.
I think you're right that there really are no alternatives that would solve this problem. I mean, you certainly hope that technology can figure how to do this, but it is complicated from a science perspective to be able to create a film that's water soluble and also does not allow helium to penetrate it. It's a very small atom. So it's may not be possible to create a truly, water soluble, quickly dissolving helium balloon. Obviously the ban is the strictest thing you can do, right? So that's, that basically assumes in some way that we can't educate, that there are a significant amount of irresponsible users, because you think that most people would be responsible. They'd use the balloon at the party, they'd pop it at the end, dispose of it properly. Now we're not going to give them access, right? So it is pretty strict. Though when I see the strandings, when I see the Marine Center and the way these animals choke on these things, it's easy to justify why we have to take strict measures to get them out of the environment. We happen to be a coastal community, and all around us is water. And within us, with all the ponds and bays, it's water everywhere. And if anyone should be taking a measure like this, it probably should be us. So, if you're going to draft the legislation, that means it'll go up and you introduce it, it goes to public hearing. I will reserve judgment and I will listen to what all sides have to say here and make a decision. It's certainly, you're giving a significant amount of time before it kicks in. So there's plenty of notice there. We did do the online survey and there was significant public support. I can't ignore that the public itself seems to want to restrict themselves from being able to purchase these balloons. So, should you put, I'm not going to be putting a bill in on this, but if you put a bill in, obviously we'll have a public hearing and I'll reserve judgment to, until after we've heard from the public before I decide which way I'm going to go on it.
If I could just add one more thing, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I forgot to mention, from the business perspective of it, people usually are fairly stocked up on the inventory that they have. And you might want to get a sense from maybe some of the small shops as to, with this pandemic, I'm not quite sure whether they've been selling balloons or not selling balloons. It's hard to tell because there's so many people out here. Maybe they're selling more than we think. It's because people are having parties at their homes for their children. But you might want to get a sense of that, because either way, if they need an opportunity to either, if it's a large inventory, to sell it to a store that doesn't have this band, or if they're going to throw it away, it's going to end up in the garbage either way. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm just throwing that out there because I just know the people that I know from being a small community that we live in that have these types of stores, they tend to have a significant inventory if they've been in business for any length of time. So just something to take into consideration as well.
Thanks, Cindy. I was
No,
thinking the same thing about inventory. Yep.
Of course, these are
it was the same problem with the straw band.
Yep.
That we had people who have a large inventory, and in fact, you're still seeing plastic straws. I don't know how long that takes. There is also the issue of enforcement. I mean, there's a lot here. I don't want to get hung up on an arbitrary date of January 2022. I think your points are well taken, Sunday. That tip, I think we need to on that side of things look into that a little bit more. But I think that the Southampton town leads by example, and to your point, Supervisor, I think particularly out here. And I know that some of the other villages are contemplating things. I think people are sort of waiting for somebody to do something. We've been waiting for the county to do something, and it's sort of stalled, but a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. And it's understandable that, there are higher priorities here. So, Sunday, I appreciate your thoughts, and we will draft something that will take all of that into consideration, and then and huddle up and see what the time is. I know Tip's got his finger up there.
Well, I just wanted to point out that this is a little different than other prohibitions in that you don't store helium-filled balloons. You fill them with helium when they're sold. Therefore, there's no reason that a store owner would have to change his inventory of balloons. And you don't keep a large amount of helium around because it leaks through the tank. So
I'm not sure I agree entirely.
It's a little different, but I agree with what John said. We're certainly flexible on the date. We more or less picked that one out of the air, and we'll look at it.
No pun intended there.
So I think Supervisor out of thin air, to Tip's point that the inventory would still be useful for air-filled balloons. So
Right.
there's no special balloon for helium. There's just balloons. And also I want to look a little harder at the Mylar balloon in particular because of, the impacts that has, particularly on infrastructure. So those are two things that we should probably look at. But
You may want to consider, John, if you're going to submit this legislation, is to not necessarily say it goes into effect January 1st, but maybe it goes into effect 1 year from the effective date of the
yeah,
legislation.
we'll look at something like that. That was a completely random date that was set. The idea is that it was understood that there are particularly different kinds of pressures on businesses right now. And the idea was try to strive towards when things return to some normalcy.
Give people a year. So this bill, if you submitted it soon, and we probably do a number of public hearings on it, maybe it could pass by June or something, and then be in effect the following June or something like that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to work that out.
But so are you going to submit legislation?
I'm going to go back and talk with Sustainability Committee. This is not my idea, but I fully agree with it. And we do things as a group on Sustainability Committee. Tiff's been the guy leading this, so I'll have a conversation with him after this meeting.
All right.
I'd also like to insert into the conversation at this point, we were talking about biodegradable balloons, and very often that leads to microplastics in the environment. So that should be an aspect that should be fully vetted. I know there's not a lot of research on it. It's kind of new at this point, and we don't really know what it does to the ecosystems or to all of us. And we all have it in us, various kinds of smaller. And, this is one of the things that I'm looking at and considering this issue and other issues like it.
No, I appreciate that, Councilman, that, microplastics are an issue. It's also used in products. A lot of people are unaware that it's in some hair care products and other things as well. It's pervasive in our society. What the impacts of it are, it's hard to say, but you're right. I think it's somewhere in the 90% of people on the globe have some form of bisphenol or plastics, microplastic is actually in their bodies as a result of that, and food that we consume as well. So, that's a broader discussion, but it's a good point. Thank you for making that.
I mean, you've got obviously the electrical grid impacts that Councilman Scavone mentioned. You've got the litter impacts, you've got the microplastic impacts. But I mean, the thing that compels me the most by far is the impact on marine life. So if I end up supporting it, it is because of that. Because if you've ever seen, a dead turtle because they've suffocated on a balloon because they thought it was a jellyfish or man of war, whatever it is, that's probably enough to make you think that these things should not be out there in the environment. And as Tip said, they get into the marine environment largely accidentally, but they're prone to get into the environment. The wind blows and it unties from the mailbox because the real estate company decided that they would let everybody know where the open house was by tying a few balloons to the mailbox, and you end up with a dead marine animal. It's really sad. So
yeah, I got a picture someone sent me of where the old Tappan Zee Bridge was dumped. That's already detritus on it from civilization, including plastics. So in a very short time. So it's just one of those things that we don't see. We kind of put out of our minds, but the impacts are quite high. Particularly with the impact both on health and safety of humans as well as marine life. So I appreciate.
We're not going to stop the science teacher in the elementary school from being able to demonstrate density by being able to blow up a helium balloon, correct? That's,
Absolutely. That would not, and there are lots of ways, as you well know, to show density, particularly in a classroom setting, in a lab setting. That doesn't involve helium, and actually is.
there's no reason why a science teacher should not be able to procure helium. So I think it's important from an educational standpoint. So, but this legislation isn't going to prohibit that.
No.
All right. All right, John, like if you submit it, we'll have the hearings and we'll debate it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's input. Tip, do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
All right.
I could, John, I just want to say to Tip, this is the third time he's presented his PowerPoint, and I appreciate that very much. And please don't take mine and hopefully anybody's concerns for a no. It's just the fact that we are trying to do our due diligence on this, and we understand the end effects, and we're taking that all, and I hope it moves forward to a public hearing and we get the public input and we could make a final decision pretty quickly. So
Great.
Thank you, Tip.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tip.
All right, thank you, Tip. So board, we're going to move on. Now we do actually have an 11:30 item. Though I know Sunday's probably anxious for us to get the agenda reviewed. I see the eyebrows, body language. Sunday, can we do it after we speak with Aram on the FIMP update? Are you that pressed? Or
I have another meeting that I need to go into shortly, but I don't know how long you're going to be with Aram. Allotted an hour for him.
I don't know either. Aram, where this is going to be at least a half hour.
Yes, I think so.
And reviewing the draft agenda is probably a half an hour as well.
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Sure. There's nothing controversial in your agenda, right?
Let me just take a look at it. Oh no, it's plenty wrong. It's plenty long, Sunday, in terms of reading every resolution. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take the FIMP piece first and then come back to the agenda.
Right. And if I'm not here, it means my deputy is behind the scenes and you can go through it and she'll be listening. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully by 1, we'll have the agenda to you. Okay. Thank you. All right, Aram.
Hi, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. We just had a conversation about helium balloons, as you probably witnessed. And this topic is also coastal related, but probably far more complicated. So, so FIMP, the Fire Island to Montauk Point Reformulation Study, which started around the time I was born and probably goes to maybe the longest study ever in government. So everything else seems a little bit more reasonable compared to that. But it is now fully funded, and it is happening, though they have delayed it in terms of our neck of the woods a little bit into 2023, the fall of 2023. There is so much involved with this, and the board first needs to understand that this is a federal project, and it's a soft nourishment project, with the exception of certain, properties getting elevated, which falls into a different category, and those are more on the inner bays. Along the ocean, it's sand, and it's a lot of sand. Aram, I'm sure, knows how many cubic yards, but we are talking about tens of millions of dollars worth of sand, or more.
Oh,
than
yeah,
that.
definitely.
Hundreds of millions.
It's certainly tens of millions in the first go round, and probably hundreds of millions over the course of the 30 years of the project. But I'd like to give the board an understanding of what this project is about. It's actually one of the most, if not the most aggressive coastal resiliency projects in America, because it combines both soft protection on the ocean beaches, and there are 678 homes within the town of Southampton and its villages that are eligible to be elevated. So it's not, this is really a multifaceted project, and it's got an initial price tag of about $1.5 billion and an additional $1.5 billion over the 30-year life of the project. So
Is that just Southampton, or is that?
That's complete from Fire Island to inlet to Montauk Point, this is also the longest and largest coastal risk reduction project in the United States. And we're at a historic point, mostly because of the impacts of Sandy convinced Congress to fully fund the initial construction of $1.5 billion.
And probably the bulk of that is Southampton, right? We're the largest player in this.
Yeah, we're getting probably the first or second largest amount of sand fill. It involves some 26,000 linear feet of beach within the town and its component villages, and includes most of the area of East Quogue and Hampton Bays, including Shinnecock Inlet.
Okay, and Aram, you're going to sort of take us through this, but this is, we don't normally deal with federal projects like this, and there are a lot of pieces that have to come into place. There are some local cost shares that kick in at certain points. There's even some things we need to spend money on now. And there's things that are reimbursable, but there are a lot of prerequisites so that if we don't get all of our ducks in a row, nothing happens for the entire region. So it's all sort of integrated. They have to get their ducks in a row. We have to get our ducks in a row, and this thing can move forward. But there is some very significant time constraints, which Aram will take us through as well in terms of when we need to make things happen. There's a lot of easements and things like that that have to be acquired or secured. So Aram, do you want to sort of start from the beginning and bring us up to speed on this?
Yeah, sure. It sounded like you wanted me to start reading from Genesis chapter 1, but I'll skip that. This project, as I've described to you, and a substantial portion of the benefits accrue to the town of Southampton and its component villages, is divided into two contracts. Contract 1 is 100% federally funded, and the expenses that the town will incur as part of its local responsibilities are 100% reimbursable. Although, as the supervisor pointed out, there is an initial out-of-pocket required. The second contract is for the 30 years of project maintenance, for which the town and its component villages would be responsible for 15% on a pro rata basis based on the amount of sand placed on any given piece of shoreline.
You can
So
screen share
those
if
are
you want.
two. I'm sorry?
Did you want to screen share or no, not yet?
Yeah, I have a presentation that the Army Corps provided that would be useful.
Okay. So let me just repeat while you do that. So there's the first major project is fully federally funded. They're going to bring an ocean dredge out here. They're going to pump for, I don't know for how long. They're going to build up all these beaches according to the plan. We don't have to pay for any of that. And then they come back periodically every 3 or 4 years, and they return it to that configuration. Sort of, they add more sand to replace what's been washed away. And that we pay a 15% local share of. However, that is going to be, there's partners there. So county-owned land will pay for their piece, town-owned land will pay for its piece, private properties will pay for their piece through the ECDs. So there's ways that gets divvied up. All right, Aram, I'm going to kick it back to you now that your screen is being shared.
Yeah, and I thank you for repeating that, because it's, this is a fairly complicated arrangement, and making sure we compartmentalize each piece of this so so that the town understands what they are actually responsible for is important. So this is a federal, state, local project, the initial phase of which is federally funded. But there are 8 signatories to this contract. The federal government and the state government are the first two. And then it's Suffolk County and the 5 towns of Babylon, Islip, Brookhaven, Southampton, and East Hampton. And then within Southampton, for example, there's work being done both in all 3 villages, Quogue, West Hampton Beach, and West Hampton Dunes. And those are proposed to be dealt with through an intermunicipal agreement. So you have on the screen here, in green are they call them structural, but this is all the sand for beach and dune fill. And then in yellow, you can see these are the non-structural. This is where houses that are within the 10-year floodplain are eligible to be elevated at 100% federal cost. Now, there is eligibility criteria, but they've identified preliminarily 678 homes within the boundaries of the town and its villages that may be eligible. Just for your information, overall in the entire area here, it's something on the order of 4,500 homes are eligible to be elevated. So we have a substantial number of them in our town. And this number 3 here is the contract number. So right now, the state has prioritized Fire Island Inlet as being the highest priority, with sand going to Gilgo Beach and Jones Beach State Park to the west, and Robert Moses State Park to the east. And contract 2 is for the dredging of Shinnecock Inlet with the deposition of sand at Road K, and Mauritius Inlet with deposition of sand at Smith Point. And contract 3, which is 2023, would be for downtown Montauk and the Tiana area. And I'll walk you through this in some detail. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that slide because it's complicated. This is a more detailed view of that, again, pointing out contract 1 is here at Fire Island, contract 2 is for the 2 inlets, and contract 3 is for Tiana, contract 4 is for West Hampton Dunes. And I can give this presentation to, I can forward this to the supervisor and everybody can review it in detail. This again just goes on to what these component pieces are: the dredging of sand from the inlets and placement on beaches for beach and dune restoration, or the offshore dredging of sand again for beach and dune restoration, or in the non-structural, the elevation of homes. This is just an example of how that process of elevation would take place. These are homes within the 10-year floodplain. And I just want to underscore, this is a multifaceted coastal resiliency project. This is not a beach fill project. In fact, only about $600 million of the $1.5 billion is going to beach restoration. Almost $1 billion is going to this home relocation within the high frequency floodplain, which speaks directly to sea level rise and coastal resiliency. This has an adaptive management plan so that as the project is implemented over many years, changes can be made along the way based upon experience. This again, just showing the project area, that the fact that there are 5 towns, 12 villages, more than 46,000 buildings within the project area. This gives you an idea of the non-structural. So Southampton, well, it says 704, I counted 673. We have about 16% of the eligible homes within the boundary of the town and villages. We'll just skip through a lot of this stuff to basically go to what this project cost. So you can see it's about 1.5 billion. It's totally federally funded and for the initial construction. And there are certain non-federal responsibilities, which what the state does is just transfer those responsibilities to the county and the town. So the state acts as a clearinghouse, but they're not really taking a lot of responsibility for these things called land easements, rights of way, what they call LERDs. And so let's just go through the terminology so everybody's very clear. Initial cost is to design, construct, and manage the initial project. Real estate includes, in our case, procuring easements on private oceanfront beach for the placement of sand for initial construction and for follow-on nourishment. So these easements extend only from the crest of the dune to the mean high water line, and they're only for the placement of sand to restore the beach and the dune, and then the replacement of that sand periodically over time, again, to restore the beach and the dune. So that is the only right that is granted to that is required of the private property owner to grant to the town, the state, and the federal government. Renourishment is the 30-year follow-on maintenance cost. It is different than this OMRR&R, which is the longest acronym I've ever seen. But this basically, OMRR&R, is similar to what the town does now on their public beaches at Tiana and Sandbar and Scott Cameron, in order to maintain their FEMA eligibility during a disaster. So this means taking annual beach profiles, going out after storms and documenting if erosion has occurred, keeping these records in-house in the town and sharing those records with the state and the federal government. It is more of a record-keeping operation than it is a physical go repair the beach operation. Renourishment is in fact the physical thing that's done periodically. Very important to keep these two things separate in your mind. Emergency repair is a really critical part of this project because under Public Law 8499, if a storm occurs that exceeds the design parameters of the project and the project is damaged, that it automatically becomes eligible for 100% federal funded repair and restoration of the project to the original project design. This is different than FEMA. FEMA no longer applies once you have an Army Corps of Engineers project. FEMA goes away. But in our case, that's better for us because FEMA only covers 75% of the actual costs, with the state kicking in 12.5 and the town kicking in 12.5. Under this authorization, it's 100% federal. So we get a 12.5% bump that we ordinarily would have to pay for. I'm showing you this slide because you're going to see it and it's going to freak you out, and I'm going to explain it. The Army Corps of Engineers has estimated what, in their opinion, it will cost to secure the real estate easements for placing sand on the oceanfront beach for each of the component towns. In Southampton, they're telling us that they want easements on 525 oceanfront properties, which is every property between Shinnecock and Mauritius Inlet up to the town line at Cupsog County Park. And they're estimating that that will cost $49 million. What they don't tell you is that over half of that money is the Army Corps of Engineers' internal costs for them to review the easements that we give them. So over half of the 49 million is an internal Army Corps cost that's not ours. Number two, we will likely not have to get all 525 easements on day one. We won't have to. It is desirable for us to get all of the easements under the provisions of initial construction, because then 100% of those costs are reimbursable. If you say got 250 of them under initial construction and then 250 under renourishment, we would be responsible for paying for the second 250. So this is a big number, but it is also not just the town of Southampton. It is broken down into the component villages. And I will show right here. Sorry, don't know how to turn the phone off. Right here, you can see within the town of Southampton, there are 140 parcels. The Village of Quogue has approximately 100. West Hampton Beach has 123. West Hampton Dunes has 154. Just incidentally, West Hampton Dunes doesn't have 154 because all of the beach in West Hampton Dunes is owned by the state of New York, and it's all one parcel. So that takes 154 off the table to begin with.
And Aram, I don't mean to interrupt. Would our number of parcels include like the parcel in front of Ponquag Beach that the town already owns?
That's correct. And it would include the parcels that Suffolk County already owns. It'll include every parcel the town owns under CPF.
Which
In
we
fact,
don't need easements for.
Right.
Right,
So,
got it.
for example, in the Tiana ECD, which this board authorized and has been functioning now for over a decade, there are 74 private parcels. So this 140 in the town of Southampton is much smaller than that number initially tells us. So anyway, one of the reasons that we were given, so don't be scared by this number. The bottom line is you need to see it because it's out there, but this number is not, I think it's, number one, it's an estimate. Number two, it is 50% of it is internal costs that don't come to us. And it is applied to a number of parcels for which easements already exist, or they are the towns and the counties and will be automatically assigned. But so what are the local responsibilities? So we have, local cost share, there isn't any, as we've described, but this real estate to build and maintain the project, that was we described on the previous slide. There's an indemnity to the state and federal governments. And, this is basically, if you want the project, you have to take responsibility for any impacts that the project may have. In the case of the groins in West Hampton, going back to the 60s, this became significant for the county because it was found the project had a lot of adverse impacts. In this particular case, we're talking about putting sand on the beach, and the likelihood that there would be any significant environmental impacts from placing sand on the beach, which is mimicking a natural process, are extremely low. So I don't view that as a large responsibility. This operate and maintain the project is the OMMRR stuff, and maintain public access to the project area. The quid pro quo for getting federal money is it must be available to the public. The good news for us is that in the town of Southampton, we have stellar, and I mean stellar, public access vis-a-vis the trustee roads, the town-owned parks. We meet or exceed all the public access requirements that the federal government has as it exists today. So we're in very good shape there. This is the detail of the real estate. This non-structural here, which is the mainland stuff, that is not required for the beach restoration and is that's the 700 parcels on the mainland that are divided between the town and the component villages. That is going to be arranged in a later contract, and the town is not going to be responsible for a big portion of that. This is the O&M work, or OMRR&R. And as you can see, if you just go through this list, this is stuff that we do on the day in and day out basis to maintain our beaches anyway. When you see the number that the Army Corps of Engineers estimates that it will cost the town of Southampton $126,000 a year to undertake O&M responsibilities, in fact, we know that it doesn't cost anywhere near that because we do it now as part of our normal course of business.
Aaron, are we eligible ourselves? Like, let's say the Tiana Bay Marine Education Center could be raised. can we get the money from the federal government to raise that, lift up that building?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the eligible project maps, but we can definitely get an answer.
There
to
might be
that.
other buildings that we own too that fall within that, diagram you showed that are town owned.
Mhm.
And just on that same subject, how would a homeowner find out if they are eligible to get their home raised?
There is a list, and I have it, and and it's public information. It's actually available on the Army Corps of Engineers website, which I can send you a link to. And so that is, that's public information. Just understand that project is not slated to occur for a couple of years. Because the way that the non-structural house elevation is going to take place is that the Army Corps is going to enter into a contract, a design build contract with a number of contractors who can handle large volumes of the entire process of raising a house. Because anybody who's ever raised a house knows it's got about 12 moving parts. And in order to do that, you need one entity in control of it. And so the Army Corps, their model for doing this is basically create packages of houses that are eligible, and then assigning them to contractors that will handle soup to nuts doing the project. And so that they're just in the gestation phase of figuring that out. So it's going to be a couple of years before they do that. But the list is available online.
Thanks.
So I've got to take notes while I'm doing this, because as my mother told me when I was very young, I have the memory of a sieve. Okay. Moving on to timing. So this is a classic, I'll just call it government operation, which covers everything. So the town was forwarded the contract called the Project Participation Agreement last Monday, and requested to have a signed contract. It's only 68 pages long. A signed contract back to the state by March 15th. So I'm looking at my calendar, and that says to me they gave us, about 3 weeks to review this contract and sign it. I can tell you that I've had conversations with the town attorney, and he is, been taking it apart a piece at a time, consulting with both the state and his fellow attorneys in the other local governments. And I have every confidence that he's going to provide you the necessary guidance to make an informed decision, but we are in a very compressed time frame. And the reason is they want to get this project to construction at Fire Island by September of 2021. So this coming September. And in order to do that, they need to have all of their agreements signed between the 5 towns, the county, the state, and the federal government by the end of May, in order to get design plans out in time for bidding it this summer and awarding it in the fall. A prerequisite to that is the WQC, which is the water quality certificate. The Army Corps cannot sign a contract on this project with the state until the state itself issues the water quality certificate. And in classic government fashion, that permit is still in review. It has yet to be issued, and it is not expected to be issued until late May. So that is that is a critical path item that will hold up the signing of the contract between the state and the federal government. The state doesn't want to sign the contract until they have all 6 contracts signed by the county and the 5 towns. And that's why they've given you till March 15th to review and sign the project participation agreement. This is the contracts, the projected path forward, at looking at doing the contract 1 at Fire Island Inlet, and then contracts 2 through 5 starting in September 2022, and our contract for Tiana in 2023. Now, one of the reasons that we were pushed, we were originally going to be in contract 2, which would have had us going in September of 2022. Reason that we were pushed was the real estate division at the Army Corps came up with this: we need 500 easements from you, and it's going to take you 2 years to get them. I think that we have an opportunity, that obstacle in our path provides us with an opportunity. If we can deliver the easements required for the project prior to September 23, the Army Corps has the money. They have the money to do the project today. What they lack are the easements necessary. So if we can, for example, do it in a year instead of in 2 years, I believe we can push our project forward. So that is both the obstacle and the opportunity for us.
Aram, I'm not seeing in the packet a resolution authorizing me to sign the PPA. I know you've been in touch with the town attorney's office, and it could be walked on, but we have a packet for next Tuesday. We pretty much have to get that into the agenda for next Tuesday's meeting so that I have the ability to sign it. So this is it's time sensitive. Christine is on the call, on the Zoom, and Jim had to step away, but
yeah, I sent Jim a copy of the Brookhaven Town Board resolution that authorizes the supervisor to sign, and I think he's amending that to for you and the board to consider.
well, if we can have the TA's office give it to me today so we can make it part of the official packet, otherwise we'll have to walk it on. So
Jim, about doing that or making it a walk-on, and obviously it'll be subject to town attorney approval before you sign it.
I'd prefer it be in the packet. So,
Okay, I'll let him know.
all right. Give the public some additional notice about it. And there are a lot of commitments that the town is making under this project participation agreement. I mean, they're good commitments because this is exactly what we need. We need a federal partner to rebuild the beaches. And we're getting it, but we have to make sure we review it carefully. So, all right.
So, I mean, just to wrap up and please, I'll be here as long as you want to answer as many questions as I can, but just to wrap up, we're looking at probably the most advanced coastal resiliency project in America, right here on the South Shore of Long Island. It's a long time coming, but this project has morphed over time into mostly raising homes in vulnerable floodplain areas and doing natural beach restoration. It's $1.5 billion. The town of Southampton is getting a large chunk of that. And we have already in place an outstanding public access program that qualifies us. We have our most significant hurdle is to deal with this easement issue. I can tell you that I've had a number of conversations with the Tiana ECD, Steve Katz. I know that the supervisor's spoken to him. He's the chairman of the advisory committee. That group is aware of what's going on and have been very supportive over time. I know that the supervisor's been speaking to Mayor Sartorius in the village of Quogue, which this project will extend into Quogue, and so we'll need some cooperation from them as well. We're at a historic point. We're at a bit of a time crunch to get the PPA signed, but to me, this is a hugely beneficial project to us and worth the time investment that we need to put into it.
Aaron, there's a few homes, for the most part, every home that's within the project area is within an ECD. And so in terms of compiling the 15% ongoing cost share, that's pretty easy. But there's a few homes between the village of West Hampton Beach and the village of West Hampton Dunes that are within the town of Southampton, but unincorporated and not in an ECD. So it sounds like we may have to work toward establishing an ECD in that area as well, correct?
Yeah, there's that 1 mile stretch between those two villages that are in the town of Southampton. And I think it makes sense to create an ECD in that area. It will receive sand that area has received sand under the West Hampton interim project. And so it's likely to receive sand again. But it's, that's a huge benefit to all of those properties, maintaining that beach and dune.
Okay, let me turn it to the board. It's just complicated stuff. So if people have questions, this is a good time to ask.
I have a question or two.
Aram, you can stop the screen sharing there.
Okay.
So Aaron, you had said that the part of the project for raising homes is further down the road. I get that. But after Sandy, there was lots of problems and still are problems continue to this day for contractors who are raising homes. I'm just wondering, is somebody going to vet that list of who these contractors are and make sure they're not the ones that did so much damage to the homes they were supposedly raising during Sandy, and people are still to this day don't have their homes back?
Yeah, a short answer to that is yes, because these contractors will be vetted and they will have a direct contract with the federal government. And so they will be vetted by the federal government. It's subject to a public bid process.
Okay. And my next question is for the sand that's from the offshore borrow areas. This is, like you said, the biggest project that's ever happened. I'm just wondering, are they the same borrow areas that have been used? Are they going to be expanded? And my concern is the effect on the fisheries that we have here.
Yeah, these are the same borrow areas that have been designated, investigated, and used partially. And the total volume of sand estimated for the 30-year project is within those borrow areas. And so at this point, the Corps has no plan to expand those areas.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Aaron, how are other, hi, how are jurisdictions handling the zoning in the areas where the houses can be raised? I know very often when houses are raised, they're piercing our pyramid requirements and height requirements, and they have to go into the zoning board for variances. And so it's an extra level, layer of approval that they need. And I was wondering if other municipalities had created new zoning laws or something in these areas to help facilitate this.
The answer is I'm not aware of any of them doing that. And that's an outstanding question because, you just added the 13th moving part to elevating your home. So fortunately, we have some time to investigate that and possibly craft some, flexible legislation that will allow people to move forward in a more expedited basis. Let me give you an example of what the town's already done post Sandy. They removed the requirement for getting a conservation board permit as long as they were just raising the house to comply with FEMA. And that enabled that process to move forward much more quickly and for many more homes to be raised than would have if you had to go through that extra permit process.
Okay, interesting. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more and a little bit deeper as well. The easements, when you say you're going to freak out, yeah. But thank you for.
If you don't freak out over 49 million, what are you going to freak out over?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, why such a disparity? Why it's so disparate from other towns? Why aren't they seeing the same issues that we are? But I understand.
It's the number. It's the number of easements.
Right, and I look forward to taking a look at the PowerPoint. Please send it over to us. I want to study it further because, this is good. And I certainly, welcome this project. My goodness, it's been all my life as well.
Those easements, whatever the costs are associated with those easements, it is fully reimbursable.
Mm-hmm.
So including the costs for, surveying and, figuring out exactly, the size of the easement and the appraising the easement and that we get, and then the actual purchase of the easement. What the numbers are partially will depend upon, I guess, that area from the dune crest to the high water mark, how wide that is, and the value of the property. But as Aram said, it's only to place sand, right? And maintain sand. So it's actually a benefit to that property owner to have this easement, but the federal government will pay for that easement as well. There may be some property owners that are willing to just sign without expecting any compensation, but I don't know how they arrived at that number. I was, shocked by that number personally. The town, and this is sort of interesting, and Aram had forwarded me some case law on this, and a appellate division decision, that said that in the town of Southampton, the public has a right of way between the high water mark and the dune crest, the right to repass and repass, different than whatever, let's say, the trustees may have in terms of, the collecting seaweed easement, fishing easement. The town itself, the town board, and the entire public have an easement, a court-affirmed easement from the high water mark to the dune crest. And I think that is significant here in terms of valuing, this easement. It's not property. We're not putting on sand on property where somebody could build a building. It's not usable property. It's property that's already encumbered. And I think maybe whoever did that calculation was not aware of the situation there, thinking it's somebody's front lawn. They figured out the value of the lot and what percentage of the lot it is. And that's an incorrect way to establish value.
It also, it was based upon the Corps' experience in Fire Island, where they were taking easements that literally ran through the middle of buildings. And so it's not apples to apples comparison.
It is important, though, when we go through this process, and you'll be asked to approve an arrangement with a real estate appraiser relatively soon after this, so we can get this in motion. But it's important that the numbers are well justified, because somebody could challenge. Somebody could say, I'm not going to sell you my easement. And then we have no choice but to condemn it, use eminent domain. Otherwise, this project can't move forward. And, so the values might end up getting established in a court. So we want to make sure that the value that we're offering is proper.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Supervisor. And also to the rest of the town board, we have been advised by the Army Corps of Engineers that it would make the reimbursement process faster if the town board hired an outside firm whose sole job was to prepare the easement documents, present them to the property owners, get the executed documents conformed and filed with the county clerk, and then delivering those documents on behalf of the town to the state of New York and the federal government. On Fire Island, the county attorney's office handled that process, and they ran into issues on the reimbursement because this is public money, and when they're so the state and the federal government are required to audit all the expenditures and make sure that each expenditure is tied back into a specific parcel of land, and that time spent by professionals on the project are allocated per parcel. And by using an outside contractor to execute that work, it provides a much cleaner record and a faster reimbursement, which I think is important to us.
Jim is telling me that he did submit the resolution for the PPA. So maybe it's in the packet and I missed it. If not, let's get it into the packet.
I think they might have been waiting for the secra. He wasn't sure if he had gotten that determination, but it definitely was submitted.
All right, so let's try to do that, even if we have to do it as a placeholder without the secret. Okay, other questions for Aaron? All right, Aaron, I'm sure there's going to be more questions. There ought to be, just because of the complexity of this. This isn't something we do every day. In fact, this is something we've never done. So it's complicated, even, for me, who, have been in government now for, I guess, 27 or 28 years. I've been following the trials and tribulations of FIMP, wondering if it's ever going to happen. As former East Hampton supervisor, and now here in Southampton, it's actually finally happening. I'm a little bit miffed that it got pushed back another 2 years, because I was sort of hoping we'd see that ocean dredge at the end of 2021 this year. Then it was 2022, and now it's 2023. Thankfully, the federal government did the renourishing, the emergency job at the end of Dune Road at Shinnecock Inlet. Really, really appreciate Congressman Zeldin's efforts there too, and Gillibrand's and Schumer's efforts to make that happen. If you remember, Chuck Schumer came out himself out there. So had that not happened, if you were telling me we had to wait another 3 years, I would say we're kissing the end of Dune Road goodbye. We weren't going to be able to wait another month or two. So I think we'll probably be okay. Maybe we can speed it up if we get those easements. But I wish it was happening a little bit sooner. It literally did start around, I think, the early 1960s.
Yeah, the River and Harbors Act of 1960, to be exact.
Yeah. So it's.
So anyone born after 1960, this project's actually older than you.
They say sometimes government moves slow. That's a little bit ridiculous, but, and particularly when you're studying a shoreline that's constantly changing. So in some of these areas, when they recognized that there was a problem, there was another 100 feet of beach, or 200 feet in some cases. And they recognized this was a problem. So, but they did at times have all kinds of hardened structures in this plan, and they've all been taken out. So there's no jetties, there's no revetments. Even recently, they were talking about shortening the groins over there in West Hampton. That's even out of it. There's no alteration to those structures either. So it's really just beach fill.
Oh, and elevating houses, don't forget.
Elevating houses.
That's more than half of the money.
It's very much in line with what I think our desires were in terms of soft, nourishment and elevation, or moving properties back, or whatever it might be. Is relocating properties, Aaron, is that part of it too, pushing them further from the water?
Not unless that is part of, the permit process, where you might shift the house landward for, a reason to get it better on the lot. But really the key is to elevate it above the floodplain. And so these are the houses in the 10-year floodplain that will be elevated to meet the 100-year flood standard. So for those homes, this is a really, really terrific benefit.
It's not just homes. There's lots of businesses as well.
Yeah. There's a full list, and it's be warned that the real estate file online is 500 gigabytes.
500
no, 500 megabytes. It's a half a gigabyte. It's a gigantic file.
Aaron, I do have one more question. I believe you said that all the inlets are being dredged under this project, correct?
Yes.
And does that include maintenance dredging into the future for the 30 years?
Yes, it does. Right now, it's every 2 years at Shinnecock.
Great, thank you.
And that material all gets bypassed down to Road K, which is really good for us, because the west of Shinnecock area gets a separate source of sand, and the sand in the inlet goes to Road K, bypassing the inlet and nourishing the beaches in Hampton Bays and East Quogue.
Thanks.
It's every 2 years, Aaron, for
Yeah,
Shinnecock?
right. That's what's in the plan. Usually they don't get to it every 2 years. It's been about three. It's usually every 3 years or post-storm, but they've have it in the plan as 275,000 yards every 2 years.
That's great. That'll help with the commercial fishing fleet as well.
Oh, yeah,
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron.
sure. Look forward to working with everybody.
All right. Same here. So, all right. So we're going back to the agenda, and I think the next thing we have is to review the draft agenda. So if everybody can grab their copy. Let's try to get through this as quick as possible. So there are 4 public hearings. Oh, first I should say the date, right? I'm sorry. This is for March 9th, next Tuesday. It will be at 1 p.m. So it's an afternoon meeting, not a night meeting. And we have 4 public hearings, as I mentioned. The first one is on acquiring lands of Island Creek properties. That's Cowneck Holdings, Gerrymander Holdings. This is in the North Sea area and amends the CPF plan. The second one is consider a local law enacting Southampton Town Code Chapters 160 entitled Mining and Land Reclamation. I believe that's a continuation of the hearing, Councilman Schiavone's law related to water quality monitoring requirements. The third one is a public hearing to consider deleting Town Code Section 330-167B3. That's a continuation of the hearing related to non-conforming uses and shifting the authority to switch from one non-conforming use to another from the zoning board to the town board. And the fourth public hearing is to consider amending Town Code Article 10.1, agricultural conservation districts to reduce the acreage requirement from 10 acres to 7 acres. Then we go into public portion, followed by town board resolutions. And the first one is being offered by Councilwoman Lofsted. Do you want to read it, Julie?
Sure. Town Board Resolution ID 35994, accept New York State DOT Section 5310, grant award of 2 buses for the senior shuttle program.
The next one, 36026, authorizes the supervisor to sign 2021 contract extension contracts with towing companies.
Resolution ID 36021, authorize the supervisor to sign New York State Farmers Market Nutrition Program Agreement for the 2021 Flanders Farmers Market.
35952, authorizes the continuation of online subscription services and publications by Thomson Reuters for 2021.
You're muted, Rick.
Thank you, John.
No problem.
Town Board Resolution 36029, authorized the purchase of 4 2022 Freightliner dump truck from Trucks Incorporated using the town ISLIP contract. Town Board Resolution 36025, authorized the supervisor to sign a consulting contract with H2M Architects, Engineers, Land Surveying 8000 to provide an engineering report for the treatment of PFAS at plant number 3 at the Hampton Bays Water District.
Town Board Resolution ID 36020, authorized the supervisor to sign a contract with Johnson Controls Security Solutions for fire alarms at the town's animal shelters.
36027, authorizes the supervisor to sign an agreement with Vigilant Solutions for the town's police department. 36018, authorize the supervisor to sign any and all documents for the permit for state pollutant elimination systems for Conscience Point Marina.
Town Board Resolution 36017, authorized the supervisor to sign contract with York Labs for the Hampton Bays Water District.
36024, authorize the supervisor to sign contract with Rosemark Contracting, Inc. for the Hampton Bays compost facility renovation. 36028, declare item surplus and authorize disposal of vehicles.
ID 36019, determination of solid waste collection permit fees pursuant to Town Code Section 205-8.
Town Board Resolution 36022, recall and amend the Town Board Resolution 2021-71.
ID 36012, reject bids for the STOP program household hazardous waste removal.
35991 amends 2020 budget for various departments. 35941 amends 2021 adopted budget and transfer from capital project stormwater management.
Resolution 36004, amend the 2021 adopted budget for the Hampton Bays Water District.
35965 amends 2021 adopted budget for police department vehicles and equipment. 35989 amends the 2021 through 25 capital budget for the Nathaniel Rogers House. 35992 amends the 2021 through 25 capital budget for shuttle bus. 35947 amends 21 to 25 capital budget to consolidate trustees bulkhead repairs. 35993 amends 21 to 25 capital program for prior funding projects. 35963 authorize expenditure from park donation restricted account. 35948 authorize purchase order encumbrances 2020 through 2021. 36011 authorizes transfer from town police restricted account. 35954 increase annual salary of Ed Thompson, environmental facilities manager. 35968 reappoints Michelle Lamole Gray to the ethics board. I thought we did that. 35648 resolution of adoption amending chapter 140 community preservation fund, the Southampton Town Code to update the town of Southampton community preservation project plan. 35725 resolution of adoption amending chapter 140 community preservation fund of Southampton Town Code to update the town of Southampton's management and stewardship plan. 32408 authorize the adoption of the town of Southampton community preservation project plan 2021. 35665 2021 part-time salaries. 35768 appoints Margaret O'Rourke Corwin to minibus driver position in senior services transportation. 35971 notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Green Star Enterprises Inc. RI Monterey Oaks Corp. And Robert Tucci Eastport, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include those properties. 35638 notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Teresa A. Bauer Revocable Trust Flanders, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include the property. Just double checking.
Town Board,
Okay, go ahead.
Town Board Resolution ID 35958, notice of public hearing to consider accepting a grant of open space in connection with the subdivision map of Edge of Woods Parkside North Sea.
Town Board Resolution 36016, co-sponsored with Councilwoman Losted. Notice of public hearing to consider amending Chapter 330-203 of the Town Code of Southampton entitled Exempt and Prohibited Signs to exempt medical testing and vaccination site signs from the permit requirements and to regulate political signs in a manner consistent with all other signs. Town Board Resolution 36014, also co-sponsored with Councilwoman Lofsted. Notice the public hearing to consider amending Southampton Code 330-210, miscellaneous provisions of Article 22 signs to require removal of obsolete signs and their supporting structures 14 days after the use or activity they identify has ceased.
Julie, can I ask you about the one before that? there's a resolution regulating signage. Let me go back to it. I guess we'll debate it, but that's exempting medical testing and vaccination site signs for permit requirement. That makes sense. And to regulate political signs in a manner consistent with all other signs. Political signs are free speech. Have you, or what is it that you're doing on political signage?
So we're
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead, Julie.
So basically, we're limiting the amount of time. The other resolution limits the amount of time after the event. This one limits the amount of time prior to the event, and also makes it consistent with other sign regulations, understanding that we do have the freedom of speech issue to make sure that we're not,
What does that mean though? Like, does somebody now have to go to the ARB to get their lawn sign approved
no,
like they would another sign? Okay.
no.
And, all right, I guess I'll have to look at what it does, but it's, it might be unsightly, but it's sort of a local tradition that people put their lawn signs out for elections and.
And people still can do that for 60 days prior to the election.
Okay. All right, so,
And the town attorney, Sean Cambridge, will be available to, answer any questions at the public hearing as well.
okay, thank you. So the next one, I'm scrolling here, is mine, 36009. Notice of public hearing to consider amending the Town Code Chapter 323 to extend the Shinnecock Hills moratorium for 3 months. That is that was the 6-month moratorium we put in place. We need a little bit more time to establish what the code requirements are going to be. We just put the contract in place with the town archaeologist who's supposed to assist us with that. All right, Rick?
Okay, Town Board Resolution 36013. Notice of public hearing to consider enacting Town Code Chapter 262 entitled Registration of Foreclosure Mortgage Properties.
Sandy, I'd like to co-sponsor that bill as well.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right, that's the last one I have. Are there any other add-ons? I'd like to get the one I mentioned about authorizing the
You will have,
supervisor to execute the project participation agreement with the Army Corps.
the fact that you've just made it verbal is okay, and Janice has the document. So she said that she was going to text you, but Janice Wilson has the document from what I'm told. So it's ready and it's in. So the verbal that it'll be on the calendar, I think, is sufficient.
All right, is everybody okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we'll have that in the packet too. All right, anything else? All right, so Sunday, you're good to publish. Sorry, thank you, you're muted, but thank you for the delay. And
I said, excellent, thank you. All right, see you all later.
my lip reading skills are a little shaky, but I thought you were saying something like this.
All right, have a good day. Take care.
All right. All right. So I guess next is probably updates. We did FIMP. Yeah, so let's just do some quick updates and then we'll go into executive session. Let me see if I can bring up the changes I mentioned. Give me a second here. All right, I'm just looking at the governor's email here. So all right, so New York is expanding gathering capacity limitations starting on March 22nd. Residential gatherings of up to 25 people can be held outdoors. Indoor residential gatherings remain capped at 10 people to reduce the continued risk of spread, which is more likely in indoor settings. Additionally, non-residential social gatherings of up to 100 people can occur indoors, and up to 200 people can occur outdoors. So that's those are, social gatherings are now allowed up to 200 people, not yet, but March 22nd, and up to 100 people indoors. So those are significant increases in the number of people that can gather. So, Ryan, I guess we'll have him on at the next meeting. We do get special event requests, and they need to conform, obviously, with the state regulations. So it will allow for a little bit of increased activity now with those, widening parameters. Okay. And other updates, let me see if I have anything else. I know that my office has notified me that Parks Department, they've opened up now the online beach permit registration. And apparently within the last 24 hours, they've already received close to 700 applications. So that's significant. I mean, it's wow. So people are using the online tools. That's going to cut back on a lot of traffic. It's going to cut back on a lot of additional paperwork. It's going to cut down on staff time and air pollution, and most importantly, COVID risk. So I think that's terrific. And think if there's anything else. Well, let me go to you guys. Is there anything you guys wanted to bring to our attention?
Hey, Jay, I think there was an announcement that April 2nd, event, arts, and entertainment venues can open up at 33% capacity.
Yes, thank
I
you.
think that's a big one.
Yeah, that's important too. Thank you for bringing that up. That's going to help with a lot of our museums and galleries and things like that. Okay, any other updates? All right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Something quick but fun. The Arts and Cultural Committee, in working with Legislator Fleming's office and SUNY Stony Brook, including Dave Colon, what we have done is we are having some graduate students in their innovations class do an economic kind of a takeoff and study on the effects of arts and culture in the town of Southampton. So they are going to be, as part of their project and classwork this semester, they are going to be categorizing and taking a deep dive into the effects of arts and culture on the local economy here in our town. We're excited about this. We're going to be working with them, and we'll keep you posted as the semester goes along.
Thank you, Tommy John. Anyone else? I'll mention that the school bus camera program is swinging into gear, and not everybody may be aware of it. And there is I want to say, month-long warning period. So you might get a letter telling you that you would have gotten a ticket. I think most people understand that they have to stop. If you see that little sidearm come out that says stop for a school bus, most people know you have to stop, even if you're not, passing the school bus. If you're passing it in the opposite direction, across the highway, you're still supposed to stop. And every school district is participating. So throughout Suffolk County. So it's all automated now. The company has put in the equipment, and sort of like the red light camera equipment, it's a license plate reader. It takes a video image, and you will get notice by mail. So there's a lot on the town end logistically that we've been working on as well. in terms of the courts and in terms of the billing and the reimbursement and everything else. I've been working with Controller Marchese and with Chief Skrnicki on this. So I think we're getting ready for it. It's a new program for us. So if it saves a kid's life, it's worth it for sure. So, we're gonna do our best to implement it from our standpoint, but every area, this is throughout Suffolk County. There's every single school district is being equipped with these cameras on their school buses. And, the biggest, I think public education piece is, to make sure, even if the bus is, let's say you're on a 4-lane highway, you're supposed to stop. Even if you're in that fourth furthest lane from the bus heading in the opposite direction with the stop arm out. They're not issuing tickets if it's a divided highway. So if there's a center median, that not a left turning lane, but an actual, like barricade or grassed area, they're not going to be issuing tickets in those locations. But if it's a road like County Road 39, they will. So just be mindful of that. All right. All right. Any other updates? All right. We have some executive session items. So I have acquisitions. There are other things too. I know there's personnel. Oh yes, personnel is listed there. Personnel on it. There likely is legal updates as well in terms of litigation and contracts. So all of those things in executive session. So let me make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Second by Councilman Martell. All in favor?
Aye.